Howdy, my name is Grant Castleberry, and I'm the president and founder of Unashamed Truth Ministries, which began in September of 2022. It began as a radio ministry on the Truth Network here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Stu Epperson Jr. came to me and said, "Hey, can we put your sermons on the radio?" And I prayed about it, and the summer of 2022, just felt the Lord leading us that direction. So September 1st was when we had our first broadcast, and then the ministry was birthed. So it began then, and we quickly realized that in addition to radio, in order to reach more people for Christ and with the truth of His Word, that we needed to utilize other forms of media. So here we are with our YouTube channel. We've also launched a podcast. We have a website where I regularly write. But more than just being a radio broadcast, you might be asking what makes Unashamed Truth unique. We really want to introduce people to God-centered theology. And I emphasize God-centered theology because so much of what you see in modern evangelicalism is what I would call man-centered theology. And what I mean by that is that the gospel is presented in terms of man's felt needs. This has become prevalent in American evangelicalism in the 20th century, where people felt like pragmatically, in order to get people into the door, we need to entertain them, we need to tell them that God is going to scratch that itch in their life. And so we want to really program the gospel according to what people want. And that, by and large, has been the prevailing Christianity in America. And moreover, that if you do this, that God will make you happy, that God will make you healthy, that God will give you good relationships. Really, all that is promised in the modern prosperity gospel. So man-centered theology posits essentially that the gospel is there to meet man's needs, that whatever the sinful, unregenerate man desires, God will meet that need, whether it's a good marriage, whether it's a good bank account, whether it's good health, and all of that is promised in a man-centered gospel. And moreover, the end of man-centered theology is the enjoyment of man, that you get something from this. And so much of our modern worship, unfortunately, is programmed towards that. And that really has become the mindset of so many modern-day Christians is, what do I get from this? Whereas God-centered theology begins with God. It begins with who God is. This is God's character. And by the way, this is where the Bible begins with the gospel. The Bible always begins with the God who is there. That God is just, that God is righteous, that in a word, God is holy. And it's only when we understand that we can truly begin to understand the gospel, because when we understand that God is holy and God is perfectly just and righteous, it's then that we understand that we deserve punishment for our sin before God. And therefore, the good news of the gospel is what Christ has done when He died on the cross. 2 Corinthians 5:21 says, He made Him who knew no sin to be sin on our behalf, that in Him we might become the righteousness of God. That being united to Christ in faith, God puts all of our sin upon Him on the cross and gives us all of His perfect righteousness. And this is given as a free gift, therefore it's of grace. And all of this makes sense when you understand that God is holy. And then not only does the gospel begin with God, but it ends with God. Our desire in the Christian life is to give Him glory, because He's worthy, because He's God. He is worthy of all of the praise. He is worthy of all of the honor. He is worthy of all of glory. And the Christian life is then leveraged for the honor of His name, as Jesus taught us to pray, hallowed be your name. That is the desire of every true Christian. And in honoring God's name, we find that our lives are sufficiently happy and joyful because they are leveraged for the one thing that truly counts, which is the honor of our triune God. So as a ministry, that's what we're about. We're about that type of God-centered theology and teaching through all of Scripture in that framework that God will be honored, and this is the greatest joy for the Christian. So that's what we're trying to do across so many forms of media, and we're glad that you're joining us on this channel. And I hope and pray that God will use this channel as a means to introduce you to that type of theology that centers on God and His glory, knowing Him and the true meaning of the gospel.